Welcome again. This is Bob Dust. We will continue our discussion on HTML helpers. In this tutorial, we will see how to build our own helpers. So let's jump to our project here, our MVC project. And what I'm going to do is to add a new folder to my project. I like putting my helpers in its own little area. So I'm going to add a new folder. And I want to name this helpers. I'm going to come into my helpers and I'm just going to add a new class. That we will call HTML extensions. Extension singular. And here is my section. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to add just a simple little helper to display the name of my section title on a page. So to do that, first of all, my class must be static. I'm going to create a public static. We're going to return type of MVC HTML string. And before I do that, I'm going to add a couple of assemblies here. Web.mvc using system.web.ui.html controls. And I'm going to throw in for later use my, what do I call this, my models. There, let's do that. So now I'm going back to my extension method here. I am creating an extension method called section title. Because this is an extension method, I use the this HTML helper, and we call it helper, and I'll add a string called title. Okay, now remember the helper is going to render HTML tags. So let's create a variable called tag. And this will be a new tag builder. And the type of tag, we're going to make it H3. H3 is a header 3 tag. And I'm going to keep this simple. I'm going to call it tag, and the inner HTML will be equal to whatever title we passed it up here. There's my title. And I'm just going to return a new MVC HTML string where the value is going to be tag.toString. That's all there is to it. So I'm creating a new tag. I'm setting the inner HTML property to my title up here, and I'm going to return the tag as a toString. Okay, now let's jump to our views over here. I'm going to use our new HTML helper. I'm going to go to my students and go to my details. And at the top up here, where it says details, let's just change this. Let's just add a line to it. Okay, before I do that, I'm going to add a link to my helpers assembly. And I will come down here, and now I can use my new section title and I'm going to put in here the model name. Make it model for name. And we should now have a section title here. Let's take a sneak peek at it. I'm going to go to my student index. I'm going to view in browser. There's my student. I go to my detail for Annabelle Lee, and I see I have Annabelle Lee up here. So Annabelle Lee displays right below my details. So let's see, take a look at this again. And we see we have in our helpers, we have details, we have our section title, and we put in whatever value we want in here. So now we could do these to our other. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to go to my edit, and in edit, I'm going to paste that in there. And I'm going to add my using them here. And my helpers. And now, as simple as that, I have added the section title for every page I have. Now, I know this could be easily done and probably better to do this using CSS and style sheets. I recognize that. What I'm trying to show you is how we go about building HTML tags. So let's focus on that part rather than other ways of doing that. Let's take a quick look at our edit here. I'm going to go to the student index. This time I'm going to click on edit. And again, we see we have our section title up here for Annabelle Lee. So there is Annabelle Lee, and we have it in our editor as a section title. This gives us consistency and uniformity throughout our pages if we develop this. Later on, if we want to change something about the title in every page, we would simply go to our HTML helper, perhaps add some other attributes here to our tag, such as style and other options. So just again showing you how easy it is or how easy it can be to build an HTML header. We could do something similar to add a page title. I'm going to copy this. We'll paste it below here. We'll change section to page and change H3 to H2. We'll save that, do a quick build. And let's go back to our page over here, set to edit. We could do HTML.page title, and this time we can put in student. This is in my edit. I could do the same thing to my detail. Same thing there. We'll save that. We'll save the edit as well. And let's come back over here. We do a refresh. Let's actually go back to list. And we click on details again. And now we see we have the word student up here. Go to edit. And we also have the consistency and uniformity across our site by using our HTML helpers. Next, I'm going to go to my model. for my student. I'm going to add an interface. I'm going to call this iEntity. And I'm going to add two properties here. One is ID, and there'll be a get and a set. And the other will be string for name. That would be a get and a set as well. I need to make two changes. This should not be public, and these should be read-only. So I have two read-only properties called ID and name for my interface. I'm going to have my student inherit my interface. I'm going to add two properties. This will return the student ID. And I'm going to add one for name or string name that will return the for name. So I have added my interface called iEntity. What I plan to do is every entity that I have will, or not everyone, my primary ones will have two properties, one called ID, which will return whatever the ID is for that class, and one called name, which will return whatever we want to call that. So I have that for my student. Let's save that. I'm going to do a quick build just because I like to make sure everything is working properly. And I'm going to go back to my helper over here, and I'm going to modify my helper so that instead of passing a string title here, I will pass it an iEntity called entity. And in my inner HTML, I will return name. I'm going to return whatever entity I pass up here, I will return the name of that entity. And now let's go to our details again. And notice how modeled here is not working because it's looking for the name. I'm just going to pass it the model itself, and it will derive the name of whatever model I pass it, because this must be an iEntity, which it is up here. It will pass that to my helper. I'm going to do a build quickly here. And I need to, let's see here, come back over here. I'm going to do a refresh. Actually, I need to go back and change my edit as well, so let me do that. I'm going to my edit, and again, instead of full name, I'm going to pass it the model. Save that. Let's do a build quickly. Build succeeded. Let's go back to our page over here. Let's do a refresh. And nothing happened, which is good. We still have the name of our student here, but now it came from our iEntity class. And if I go to my edit, it's the same thing. So that's a good thing. So again, let me refresh what we did. In my extension method, I changed my helper. Instead of taking a string, it will take a data type of identity. I'll look at my model. I see that student is an identity, which means it has values for ID and for name. It gets the ID would be student ID, and the name would be full name. Let's go to our course. Now let's try the same thing for course. Let's have course inherit identity. And we will also have properties of this will return course ID. And I think we already have a name for the course. We do, so I don't have to do anything there. We're fine there. So our course looks fine. Let's go to our course details. We will add in our helpers. And instead of details here, we're going to use our helper. And we will pass in our model. And now we can add this to every page we have that has the object that uses identity. Let's do a quick build. Let's go back and look at our page over here. Let's go to courses. We'll choose a course. And we'll go into details for C#. And we see we have our C# up here. So again, let's refresh that. In my model for course, I added that inherits the interface identity, which means it has both an ID and a name. And this one already has the name, so we'd have to add the ID. I go to my details page. I use my helper here to pass any model that is of type identity. And it will carry through to my web page, and there we have the use of our helper to grab our name. Again, nothing fancy here. We're not doing anything complicated or unusual or even that interesting for now. But I just want to show you how we can use helpers to do some simple things, maybe some complex things. So speaking of complex, let's do something a little more complicated now. Excuse me. For our next task, let's go to our helpers. And we have our section title here. We have our page title. Let's have one a little more complicated. This time we're going to do a radio button list. So we're given a list of items. We will create a radio button list from the items. Again, nothing really fancy or sophisticated. Well, let's see what we can do here. Let's do public, static, MVC, HTML string, and we'll call this RBL for radio button list. And we'll do our HTML helper, and this time we're going to do an IEnumerable. In other words, a list of identities. And we'll call this list. Let's call it items. So to do a radio button list, we're going to iterate through our list of items and create some input tags, radio type input tags. So let's do a string builder. HTML equal new string builder. And I see I don't have my text item up here. So let me add my using system.text, and that should handle that little issue. There is my string builder. So now we're going to do a for each, and we're going to iterate through our items. If I could type, it would help. And we'll create a new tag builder. And this type will be an input. Now, HTML tags have various attributes associated with them. So we're going to merge some attributes together. And the first one we're going to do is ID. And this will be, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create an RBL. And what I want is the ID number of the item. So the name of my builder is going to be RBL. It's called a pipe. It's a big vertical line. And I'm going to add the ID number or property from the item. And we're not going to use this today in this tutorial, but later on we'll see this will be helpful to us. And this has more attributes. And we'll give it a name. And the name will be RBL. I'm not creative with names. You may come back later and change that. But for now, we just leave it RBL. The type will be a radio, if we want this to be a radio button. The value will be the name, the ID number. And we'll make this a string. And it's not menu, it's item. So we're going to convert the ID number to a string, because all these attributes must be strings. And the value of the item will be the ID value from our iEntity. The inner HTML will be the item name. Remember, this is an iEntity, so it has a name property. We are going to append the tag to our string builder up here. And I'm going to put a couple of spaces in here. Let me put these in quotes. These are HTML spaces. And I know we could probably do this with a style, but I'm not trying to show us that at the moment. And so I added 4 spaces to the end of my tag. And I now have my tag built. All this goes through a for each loop. And I need to return an MVC HTML string. I'll create a new one. and I will pass to it my HTML.toString. So as simple as that, may not be look that simple, but easy as that was, I have created, so I built a string builder so I can add to my string. I'm going to create an input tag. I'm going to set the ID equal to RBL pipe and then the item ID. Later on, when we get into some JavaScript, we'll see how to use that. We'll just name the attribute RBL. So all of these will belong to the same group. Maybe I should call that RBL group. How's that? The radio is the type of input as opposed to other types like checkboxes and others. The value is going to be the ID from the item. Again, the item is an I entity. The name will come from the item as well, which is also an I entity. I have my tag. I add it to my string builder up here. I append some spaces at the end. Maybe if I put a closed parenthesis there would help. And I return a new MVC HTML string where the value is my string builder up here. That looks good. Let's do a build here. And we have a clean build. So let's see this in action. Let's go to our course index view. I'm going to add a link to my helpers. I am going to add a, oops, I don't want that. I'm going to add a link to my RBL. I'm going to pass it my model. Remember my model? My model is an IEnumerable of course objects. I'm going to pass that to the builder here, HTML builder, the RBL that we just built. And I should get a radio button list of my courses. There won't be anything fancy here, but let's take a look at it. Do a quick build. I'm going to go to my web page again. Here's my C# courses. I'm going to click on back to list. And again, I warned you, it's not real fancy, but there is my radio button list. I just pass it my, all I do is pass it my model. Go look at the helper again. The helper just built a series of input tags here. Let's go back to our view over here. Let's take a quick look at our source code. And we can see maybe in here that, here we go. We have our input type is radio, value 1. ID is RBL pipe 1. The name, RBL group. The value, the inner HTML. C#2. Got some spaces here. Got another radio. This is our second item. Value is 2. The ID is RBL pipe 2. Again, we'll use that later when we get into JavaScript a little bit. Same group, different name. Then some spaces at the end. So that's our HTML. We'll modify this later on as we get into JavaScript to make it a little more useful to us. I just want you to see that. Again, there is our radio button list. Let's go back to our code over here. And we see this is all we had to do. Again, nothing really earth-shattering here. But later on, we could build and we might even do this, build a transcript or some other items where we just create the transcript using HTML helpers, and anywhere we need a transcript, we could just link in our HTML code for that. So I may even do that in the class. We'll see how time goes. That is the end of this tutorial about how to do HTML helpers. Again, I am still Bob Dust, your instructor for the ITP 244 class, and I hope this was helpful to you. See you next time.